So this is the 80s.
It was a free-for-all for concepts.
When your guard is down, bam!
Very impressive gore.
I just think they're hilarious.
It's showtime.
80s horror was honest. Most horrifying things that I'd ever seen. Terrific.
It felt like a simpler time. Good and evil, right and wrong.
It's pushing back against a lot of what's happening in the 80s at the time.
Things that people really are afraid to talk about.
Reaganomics, AIDS crisis. Boundaries were being broken. It was taboo.
Groovy.
Sex and nudity on screen, and it's just as much of a hook as the violence was.
That resonates on a biological level with every human being.
It got into your head.
I'd sit friends down and be like, you gotta see this.
Horror has given a lot of women great roles to play.
Equal opportunity ass kicking is what I'm all for.
Kincaid represented the minorities all over the world, and he was a hero.
Everything's ironic. Everything's funny.
You get to have the fun of the danger without the real danger.
Tension, chase, kill.
It's just our survival.
That element of the unknown, that sense of mortal fear, is what the quintessence of horror is about.
We got special work to do here, you and me.
It's unrelenting. The blood in the gore.
Horror films are excessive. They're purging.
Everybody was trying to outdo each other with the stunts.
I will take practical effects any day over CGI.
I wanted to be the guy in the monster suit.
The makeup artists became one of the stars of the movie. Monsters, vampires.
Cavalcade werewolves. I thought I was making the only werewolf film.
It was really disturbing and phenomenal.
Every single person on this earth has a little bit of darkness in them.
I want to have extreme feelings. I want to laugh loud, and I want to worry, and then I want to cry. And it's all about the emotion.
I was a kid in Stranger Things that would hop on my bike with all my friends, ride down to the video store, rent a stack of horror movies.
We were all in the moment and making stuff up.
I love the magic of the movies.
We don't take ourselves seriously, but we take the movies very seriously. Nostalgia is powerful.
Guilty pleasure? I'm not guilty about it. I don't feel guilty. I think it's great.
We have such sights to show you.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to a very, very special episode of Midnight Double Feature. As usual, I am your main host, the most important host. Nobody else really matters. It's me. It's Colin. Along with me, the War Machine to my Iron Man, the Brody to my Tony Stark is Zoheb Ali. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, man, I'm good. How you doing?
I'm good. I know this is super early for you. It's like 7 a.m. there. It's like a cool 2 p.m. on a Sunday for me, and I'm like,
it's a work day. It's kind of like rise and grind. It's all part of the hustle. Don't worry.
Right. And hey, this is so worth it because it's not just me and Zoheb. We are with David Weiner, the director of In Search of Darkness. David, how are you doing, man? I'm so happy to have you on here.
Happy to be with you guys. It's a pleasure to triangulate with you from Los Angeles.
Right, yeah. It's you got Nashville, you got New South Wales, you got we're all over the map. But yeah, in case for anybody who is not aware of who David is, or you're like, who the hell is David Weiner? David is the director of In Search of Darkness and also In Search of Tomorrow, correct? That's about to be out as well. Yep. And also the sequel to In Search of Darkness that the Kickstarter is going right now, In Search of Darkness 2. I am a huge fan of this documentary. I haven't even seen the other two, and I can tell you I love them already. I was so excited when I first saw that I was like, I have to have this. The image of the kid sitting in front of the TV and the Super Nintendo. I was like, that is me. It's like, that is me. I have to get this. So I was so excited to not only eventually, become a Kickstarter, like a patron of In Search of Tomorrow, but because of that, I was watching In Search of Darkness, and now this thing's coming up. So I'm extremely, extremely happy to have you on here, because this is, anybody who listens to this show is like, I am the 80s horror guy. Like, this is around October, the planets are aligned, the moon is full, my power is at its fullest. So I'm super excited. But I don't want to, just talk your head off the whole time. Give us a little bit of background and, exactly what your kind of history is and maybe what led you up to doing In Search of Darkness, Search of Tomorrow, and, et cetera.
Well, I first have to commend you on your shirt, your Stephen King Rules Monster Squad shirt.
Yeah.
Very cool, very cool. Andre Gower was in Search of Darkness Part 1, and he's back for In Search of Darkness Part 2. He did his own documentary called Wolfman's Got Nards.
Yeah.
That just got released, so plug for that because that's a really good documentary, and it's all in the family. It's all really great stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we're about to start, and I'll give you as much history as you want until you give me the hook. But just to clarify, In Search of Darkness Part 1 was something that was a Kickstarter that turned into this massive super doc, which turned into quite the positive experience for everyone involved. And it's currently playing on Shudder now. And now we are launching In Search of Darkness Part 2. It's actually not a Kickstarter. We are selling it as a pre-sale. And it's an opportunity right now if you want to get your name in the credits. The movie is done. I'm still working on it, like polishing all the corners and sound mix and all that kind of stuff, graphics. But the movie is done. We've delivered the rough cut, and it's between now and October 31st, midnight Halloween, probably Hawaii time, because we're all over the map here. It's between now and then that you can back the project, get your copy. You get a cool package with 3 posters. You get an enamel pin. You get a slipcover. You get a download of the first movie with an option to buy the hard copy. A lot of people missed on that first time around. And you also get access to 12 months of our online horror Discord community, which is super cool, and that's very new this time around. We've already been actively for In Search of Tomorrow and In Search of Darkness doing bi-weekly Q&A watch parties with talent from these movies. So whether it's Jeffrey Combs or Adrienne Barbeau or Kelly Maroney, In Search of Tomorrow, we do, our first one was with Flash Gordon himself, Sam J. Jones, who did running commentary through the entire movie. We got all sorts of really fun stuff. So now that I've evaded talking about myself, trying to keep it a big mystery in case anyone's interested. But you know what? I'll just give you the nutshell version because I'm capable of talking a long time. But yeah, I grew up back east in New York, and family from Chicago, and went to Ithaca College in upstate New York. Went to film school, and then packed the wagon and headed west, and came out to Los Angeles and started working in movies right away. I was very fortunate to work on movie sets and TV and commercials and music videos, mostly as a non-union assistant director, but I would take whatever I could get, art department, locations, even being a stand-in for a movie. Really fun stuff. Then I got into development. Then I got completely sidetracked with the whole online explosion. That's how old I am. That was new when I was, that there was no internet. There were no cell phones. I was using a pager when I first came out to Los Angeles.
You have an AOL email
I still have my AOL account, embarrassingly so, because I've never had a problem with it. And they had just invented fire. So, and electricity. And anyway,
hey, broke, don't fix it, right?
But I bounced around in Los Angeles for a couple decades now, and the internet is something that definitely has been good to me. And I ended up working at Entertainment Tonight for 13 years, and I ended up by all sorts of circuitous circumstances having a wonderful job, being able to be the editor-in-chief of Famous Monsters of Film and magazine I loved as a kid.
Yeah.
Writing for the Hollywood Reporter, LA Weekly, and then these movies came along, and they were the perfect convergence of my skills as a producer, a coordinator, a writer, and an interviewer and a director, and getting an opportunity to take these genre passions that I love and focus them into these sort of super doc experiences where you get to learn all about these movies and learn new things if you knew about them in the first place.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, you can tell kind of when you're watching this that this is obviously to have a documentary that's this in depth and as at that length. This is not just a passerby who's like, hey, no one's done a documentary about this. It's like, no, this is definitely a fan doing documentary about the thing that they love. And because that's the way I felt watching it. I was like, man, this is everything that I really, and I guess that's kind of leading into like my first kind of question was, there's been a lot more, and I guess it's kind of more of like a statement / question, but recently there's been a lot of the documentaries like, Never Sleep Again, even though it's not super recent, but Never Sleep Again kind of comes to mind. I know they've come out with like Unearthed and Untold, the Pet Cemetery documentary, Pennywise, the story of it. There's a lot of these that are coming out, and it's awesome, but they're about one specific kind of franchise. So there was something about In Search of Darkness that was just like this Voltron of like, like all this stuff coming together that I was like, dude, this is awesome, because what's really interesting to me about the documentary is not hearing Kane Hodder talk about Friday the 13th. It's seeing Joe Dante go, yeah, I like Monster Squad. I was like, holy shit. Like, that's awesome. I was like, was it a conscious kind of effort at the beginning to be like, hey, because I'm sure Kane Hodder is just like, I know I would be bored to tears eventually, just tired of talking about the same thing.
I would be so over it. I'd be so over it if I was Kane Hodder.
Yeah, that's right. Like Robert Englund, I'm sure he loves Freddy Krueger, but eventually you hit a point where you're like, dude, like, I do other stuff. I directed 976 Evil. It's like, cut me some. I need to be known for something else. So was it a conscious effort with all of these things on the rise right now to be like, let's diversify this and have these people talk about something else rather than the things that they're known for? Because that's what it came across as. It's like, this is very cool. It seems like they're giving people an opportunity to kind of branch out from just what they're known for.
Well, it's a good question, because the approach to how this movie would come together was a bit of a tightrope walk in trying to balance what people want versus what we can offer. Because if you go one way or the other, you're always sort of negating what the other possibilities are. And so, to me, it was always an opportunity, because we had everyone in the cast sitting down talking to us about 80s horror movies. But you had to have them talk about their own projects. Otherwise, it's a wasted opportunity. So there's always going to be crossover of material that they've talked about before. But in the conversation, my thought process is, the longer we get to talk to any of these folks, Kane Hodder, for example, you might get a nugget of information or an angle about his thought process about working on these movies that we never got before. But in addition to that, having him talk about, the bird scared the crap out of me as a kid, and I'm afraid every time I see a bird, it gives me chills. That's stuff that you don't get anywhere else. And so it was very much what I felt set this apart, other than the structure itself and the fact that we're focusing only on this particular decade, but also sort of drawing on the foundations of what came before it and how it influenced what came after it. It is cool having all these people talk about their favorites, and their eyes light up, when they're talking about, in this new movie, we get Clancy Brown. Clancy Brown is in Search of Darkness Part 2. And of course he's more sci-fi and horror, arguably, with Buckaroo Banzai and Highlander, but he did The Bride. He was in Pet Cemetery too, even though that was early 90s. So to have him talk about not only being in The Bride, which you don't really hear him talk about much anyway, but also having him talk about Altered States, why he loves The Keep, Michael Mann's The Keep.
My mind just goes to Shawshank. I don't know.
Yeah, there you go. Shawshank, exactly, and the Stephen King connection. But yeah, he talks about Angel Heart, and that to me is so great to have him talk about movies that he's just a fan of,
Well, especially, it's like, I know he's not known for horror, but Ira Hadley in Shawshank is fucking terrifying. Like, that guy scares me. And he's such a big guy. Like, he towers over Christopher Lambert in Highlander. You're like, dude, this guy is a Kurgan. Ira Hadley and Kurgan, like, no, those are horror characters. Like, those guys are terrifying. And it's crazy to think that guy's Mr. Krabs on SpongeBob. You know,
Yeah,
you're like, oh my God.
Clancy is the nicest, one of the nicest guys. I'm not going to say the nicest because there's a lot of nice guys out here in the industry, but he is absolutely a really down to earth, cool dude. And I've crossed paths with him in the past through mutual friends, but it was nice to just be able to remind him how I knew a mutual friend, and we got to talk about that. But I have to tell you, when we sat down to do our interview, what I always like to do in the beginning is I need to get room tone. And so I say, all right, let's take 30 seconds of just absolute quiet. Here's your Zen moment of silence for 30 seconds to center yourself, and then we'll start talking. And he just stared me down. Directly staring me down. And here I am being stared down by Clancy Brown, like the most intimidating character on film. So I took that opportunity to stare him down immediately right back at him. And we had a staring contest. And then he blinked. And then I said, you blinked. And he said, that's the conceit.
Yeah. If you'd have blinked me, I would have been like, there can be only one. That's the first thing I would. There can be only one.
I failed to mention that I wet my pants and I had to change them. But
yeah, right. Then I had to run off real quick.
Exactly.
Yeah, and in talking about guests coming on for the second one, there's so many people, in that 4.5 hours. That was there anybody that declined the first time, and then once they saw this, were like, okay, yeah, I'll come in for part 2? Was there anybody who was like, I might actually have made a mistake, like I think I need to show up for the second one, or was it just people that couldn't be fit into the first one?
Just to add to that before you do start go, David, I also want to get your dream guest that you really haven't been able to get. And look, let's go with living or dead, because I know you'd love to get Wes Craven in there, or Alfred Hitchcock, dude. Alfred Hitchcock, just to see how it's evolved,
Well, then you just opened up the Pandora's box of dream guests. They're
right.
Multiple. I just watched. I just did The Birds is on my mind because I just did a rewatch of it 2 nights ago, and Hitchcock would be absolutely incredible. Or Tippi Hedren talking about how Hitchcock totally terrorized her, during that shoot. She's told that story many times, but it's what's cool about this movie is that it's a time capsule, and a lot of these people. It's something, they've been around for a while. Some of these people are in their 70s. John Carpenter, for example. It's very important to get these guys sitting down at least one more time and getting a couple new stories and perspectives if it's possible. Because when people look back at this era, I think not like I feel like I'm doing some grand work. But I think it is important for fans of the genre, at least, to have this collection of people all in one place, So the first time around, we went out after all sorts of people, and they either were happy to do it, or we couldn't get our schedules to align, or they never got back to me. And what the reality was with the first In Search of Darkness Part 1 was, we could only fit in so many people. I mean, we were getting towards 50 people, and at a certain point, you have to just stop. You don't have the budget to keep shooting. You got a movie that you need to make. You need to have a pretty good balance of directors and writers and effects people and actors and influencers and journalists and people who know what they're talking about. Composers. At a certain point, you have to just, even if you want everybody, because I do wish I could have everybody,
right.
You just got to stop. You just got to stop at a certain point. And so I was very satisfied. Yes, there were more people that I wanted. Yes, there were people, Tom Savini, for example, is someone who, for In Search of Darkness Part 1, said, yes, sure, we could never align. I mean, I was literally in Pittsburgh for a day where I sat down with Tom Atkins and Doug Bradley, and both said, so is Tom coming in? And I'm like, he's in Ireland right now. It just wasn't working out. And so what's really fun is if you watch the trailer for In Search of Darkness Part 2, Tom Savini, who got to see the final version of In Search of Darkness 1 and said he really enjoyed it, He's just like, I'm in Search of Darkness Part 2. Here I am, I'm in this one. And Robert Englund was the same way. It was really rewarding to have Robert Englund just be like, I saw your movie. I loved it. It's a hit. I'm very happy to be in this movie because I really like the movie and I like being in hits.
Nice.
Whether that's true or not, that it's a hit, it's definitely resonating with a lot of people. And so the fact that I'm able to get a couple extra people, 15 new faces and a bunch of, we did 23 new interviews overall. 15 new faces and a couple, the rest are from the first film, but new interviews. Kane Hodder, Cassandra Peterson, Bill Moseley, a bunch of folks. But lastly, I'll just say, in this era of COVID, it's not easy. And I had a bunch of people lined up who had said yes, who just said, thank you, I'd love to do it, but sorry, I'm not coming out right now. And I said, I respect that completely. And so we had our hands tied because we had even more cool names lined up, who I won't mention, that said, I would love to do this. And we just couldn't make it happen in our time frame because we were delayed by 3 months of not going out and doing anything. All that time I was using all this wonderful unused material because I did an hour or 2 hours, sometimes even 3 hours with people on round one. Round two is the same way. And, when I finally did get to go sit down at Robert Englund's house, not 5 weeks ago, we sat down for 3 hours and I got some amazing material. And so he's been incredibly generous and there's so much of material available. But I hope people will be a little understanding. I'm very proud of this film through and through, and I have no arm tied behind my back comments, but we did have a crunch in terms of time and limitations that we're all experiencing right now.
Absolutely, I completely understand that. Like with the documentary, I think with In Search of Darkness, the first one, Colin, I think it might be best to say that you, out of the two of us, are the horror fan, right? Like, I mean, I do love the genre of horror. I mean, but you go deep, right? So when I sit down to watch In Search of Darkness, here's this 4-hour, 24-minute documentary, and I'm just like, okay, am I going to know anything that's going to be in this documentary? I don't know how this kind of like plays for, I guess, an introductory audience to the 80s, to the 80s horror genre. But man, did it play well! It was just a run through of the entire decade. Not only, I'd seen movies like obviously Nightmare on Elm Street and The Shining and things like that, but movies like Maniac, like the little kind of like niche ones that get thrown in there, and you show like the kind of like the best moments of these movies. And I'm just like, okay, now I want to watch that. It did such a good job of like just really piquing my interest with these movies. And now I'm just going to be able to be like, all right, look, if I say that on the shelf, and I say shelf because I still like to buy digital media, like hard copy media.
Yeah, tangible in your hand media. If I could interrupt, you guys represent the polar opposite complication tightrope that I have to work on, because there's the people who appreciate it but don't know it well and are interested in knowing more, and then there are the people who they know essentially everything, and to try and satisfy both is a very difficult balancing act. And I it's been very rewarding to have people who know the genre really well say I really connected with this for all sorts of nostalgic reasons, and I learned a couple things along the way, and I reinforced the fact that I already knew some things that made me feel smarter, versus people who are like, I didn't know much about any of these things, so now I'm getting introduced to them, and now I have my brand new queue of movies that I want to explore or revisit, or it's been recontextualized and now I have a different take on it, and maybe I am more interested this time around than I was last time when I dismissed it. And there are people out there who are saying, why would I want to sit through 4 hours of material I already know? And my answer is, I don't know. Why would you? It's like, if you know it, okay, then congratulations. Like, you should feel smart that you're such a fan that you've done you know all this material. So arguably, if there's anything for you, it's a trip down memory lane of nostalgia, and maybe there are some nuggets of information there. And like you said earlier, Colin, it's a thing you don't get anywhere else is these people talking about films that they love in addition to their own movies. So it has that to offer, and I felt like that is kind of the balance for people who really do know it all. They at least get that material, which is brand new. So, it's an interesting conundrum as a filmmaker to try and appeal. I'm Abraham Lincoln. I'm trying to appeal to everybody, but I know I can't do it, but
right.
I think you did a great job, dude. Honestly, I'm sitting there just absolutely entranced by this. I check my watch and I'm just like, holy shit, it's been 3 hours already. Like it just flew by. I guess the question that I kind of like wanted to hone down on is mostly about documentary filmmaking and how you approached it. So, there's this kind of like golden rule in documentary filmmaking where I guess filmmakers in film school are often told to approach it objectively, which is really hard to do. I mean, like, given that, you've probably researched so much for a 4.5 hour documentary and, saying that, I wonder how much was left on the cutting room floor. You approach this like huge like project, and it's just so hard to remain objective. But I kind of love how when you watch this documentary, it feels like there's just so much love there. Like, it feels like you've leaned the other way of like being totally like, this is all me. Like, here's my love for it. Like, when you were creating In Search of Darkness, was that something you were cognizant of, like, to be objective, or were you just like, screw it, this is a love letter, I'm going to pour as much love in as possible?
Well, I wanted it to be informational, educational, entertaining, and an appreciation. And I did not want to insert my opinions at all. It's next to impossible as a filmmaker not to put yourself and your own imprint on something. But I wanted to have a balance of points of view. I didn't want to say we all love it or we're all cynical. I tried to keep it generally positive about everything and everything on an even playing field. So whether you're talking about My Bloody Valentine or you're talking about Videodrome, two movies arguably on different ends of the spectrum, higher and lower in terms of critical acclaim and filmmaker talent behind it. To me, that's an even playing field. You love both for different reasons, and here's why. And that's why what we sort of explore and discuss. But it's a point of view is a difficult thing to step away from, and I just wanted to keep it as apolitical as possible while covering. Keep it as apolitical as possible while also tackling some controversial subjects and allowing the speakers to share their varied opinions and justify the way they think about it. And then it's up to you as the viewer to accept or reject. And that was very important to me.
Yeah,
Nice.
That absolutely shines through.
Yeah, and to what Zoheb was saying, there's a part, and it's unintentionally hilarious, but I laughed so hard in Maniac, where they're talking about Maniac, and it's the shot of Tom Savini's head just exploding, and it cuts to Mick Garris, and he's like, "Yeah, it's a little much for my taste."
Right,
it's unintentionally hilarious. Like, I absolutely love that part. But when it came to these movies, was there a conscious like effort of Halloween, Freddy, Jason, like they all really have their own documentary. So I like the fact that it's not just like, hey, we're going to talk about the classics and we're not just going to talk about Sleepaway Camp and Slumber Party Massacre and Basket Case. There's a love for all of it in there. There's something like, was it a conscious effort trying to find the balance to say like, hey, this is going to be, we need to make sure, was there more of an effort like, hey, these smaller movies, we want to do a little bit more on them, or were you trying to keep everything like an even keel? Like, what was the process with getting those balanced?
It was very tough for me because I'm an absolute completist, and I already knew that I was losing the battle because I can't put everything in this movie,
Right.
And so it really only scratches the surface. There were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of movies from around the world that came out and exploded in the 80s, especially because of cable and straight to video in addition to theatrical releases. I decided to, in Search of Darkness, focus on North American film. And I knew I would get some flack for it, but it was the only way I could sort of wrestle this giant alligator and sort of keep it in one place. And I knew if I'd ever get an opportunity, we could explore more. And what was very cool was that for part one, I wanted to make sure that I hit all the franchises, and then the dilemma was, well, I've hitting, you go to Friday the 13th, there are 17,000 Friday the 13th movies. You go to Halloween, there are 1,422 Halloween movies, obviously exaggerations, but it's like, it's not just one or two sequels. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Hellraiser arguably was easier. Child's Play was easier because Hellraiser only had 2 in the 80s. Child's Play only had 1 in the 80s, but when you're getting to Friday the 13th, you're getting on Nightmare on Elm Street, you're getting to, Texas Chainsaw was easy too because there was only 1 Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 in the 80s, but the rest, it's tough. And it was very important to me that I didn't want this to be like the greatest hits package. I wanted to put in, A Company of Wolves, which is one of my favorite movies. I thought, if you have Brian Yuzna talking about Reanimator movies, it's a crime not to put the focus on Society, which is just an underseen gem. And now, everyone knows about the shunting now, right? But for In Search of Darkness Part 2, it now is this wonderful opportunity to go broaden the scope and do international movies. Plenty of Italian movies. I've got, Bad Taste from Peter Jackson. I've got, Shinya Tsukamoto, who did Tetsuo the Iron Man. I did an interview with him, when he was in Tokyo. I didn't go in Tokyo. I did it through ones and zeros on the computer, but we got a little crew there. Lots of Italian stuff, Hong Kong entry. I wanted to try really demonstrate that, again, only scratching the surface, and there are so many that we could not include. It was important for me to show that there's a love for worldwide cinema, and it did invade our video stores in the 80s, and I covered that. And what's cool about the movie and the way I put it together for me is that if you can't focus on individual movies because you literally don't have the time in a 4.5 hour movie, which is we're doing that again, another 4.5 hour movie.
Beautiful.
There's still not enough. There's still a wealth of material that is not even going to be mentioned in this movie, but at least it's an opportunity to go investigate and find more. And a lot of these expanded chapters in between the breakdown of each year, where you choose, a handful of movies, there's multiple references to all sorts of movies from the past and the present and the future sometimes, from the 80s. And it broadens the scope of how all these either influence or are influenced by cinema, horror cinema, genre cinema.
Gotcha. Yeah. And speaking of so many, you were talking about so many clips being in there and having to pick and choose what exactly you can put in and what exactly you can't. Was it a logistical, copyright nightmare to get all of that stuff in there? I know Zohab's a lawyer, and I know we're both kind of interested in the actual
logistics of it,
yes,
right?
the logistics of it.
How do you get permission to use what? What's in the public domain, what's not? Because I can't imagine a lot of it is.
I'll keep it simple. You need a copyright lawyer to make sure that you're doing everything properly, and you can't get the movie insured unless you get the sign off from the copyright lawyer. So you got to make sure you're properly arranging or crediting or copyright lawing all of this stuff, properly. And it's I'm laughing because my editor, Samuel Way, who makes this, such a great film, he's currently doing the legal sheet, which for a 4.5 hour movie is just a logistical nightmare to make sure.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can honestly just imagine the paperwork.
I'm just laughing because, literally just this morning, he's just like, my world is shit right now because I'm doing the legal sheet.
Oh god, that's seriously, like as yeah, I can only imagine what his kind of like computer like hard drive looks like in terms of like organizing and arranging everything. Like it's
It helps to
seriously,
have
that
an
must be intense.
extremely organized person, and I cannot not say amazing things about the team that it requires to put this together. And it's very important to say that this is not my movie. This is a movie I wrote and directed and was a producer on. But this is the brainchild of Robin Block, who executive produces these movies, and he has assembled an incredible team. And we were all remotely working around the globe. He's in, Robin's in the UK. Samuel Way is in the UK. It's just a profound experience to be able to make a movie like this literally over the computer from different locations and get it done in an extremely efficient way. But we have a great team doing all the live events and the watch parties and all the the Discord community and all the marketing, our art department, and we do this with other producers as well, and we do this with essentially a 13, 14 person team, doing all of these things. And that's selling it ourselves too. I mean, we do it all ourselves. And so it really helps to have everyone spinning multiple plates, but doing it very efficiently and being responsible and resourceful and reliable, where you could just say, we need to get this done, and they get it done. And we have, meetings all the time. We're always available with each other on WhatsApp. The clips go back and forth constantly. Google Docs and is a very valuable tool. I can keep on. I mean, it's like the nitty gritty of how this gets done is complicated, but it's very cool because there's a lot of working parts, and we managed to get it done in a very short period of time and get it out there. And it's such a strong team. I'm very proud of everybody.
Absolutely. I can only imagine just the level of like collaboration that must go into something as hefty as a nearly 4.5 hour documentary. But not only just one, like I mean like multiple. Like it's just insane. But look, I guess getting to my next question. So this one's kind of like talking a bit more about the horror genre as a genre, right? let's tackle this.
Sure.
So I guess to date, like there's only been 6 horror movies nominated for Best Picture, right? Like with one actually only winning, right? So you got The Exorcist, Jaws, Silence of the Lambs, The Sixth Sense, Black Swan, and Get Out. And Silence of the Lambs was the only one that actually won. And I guess something I noticed when people talk about each of those movies, particularly with something like Get Out, which I think is a horror movie, people say that they try and remove it from the genre of horror. Like they try and you touched on this very briefly in Such Darkness, where horror is kind of like used as like a derogatory term, like to be in like a genre that brings like the quality of the film down. Because I guess it brings certain expectations, things like, hardcore violence or sex and nudity and things like that. So, when people talk about movies like Get Out, they automatically say, "Oh no, that's more of a thriller." It's not a horror movie. Like, what's like? Do you think people? Do you think it's still the same today? Like, you brought this up in the 80s, right? About like this was prevalent in the 80s. Like, do you think people still frown on it, or like they put it down as a horror movie?
Oh yeah, the labels continue today. I mean, yesterday, I saw someone on Twitter saying, "Is Silence of the Lambs a thriller or a horror movie? What do you think?" There's still debate about these things. I don't know if you listed it on your list, but I would put Parasite on that list too, in that one.
Oh, totally.
When you look at Parasite, I wouldn't say that is a horror movie, but what's unique about the horror genre is that it usually straddles multiple genres. It's not just one. It's not just horror. It could be a comedy, it could be a drama, but at some point things get horrific, and then arguably it is a horror movie. But it's almost like Aliens. What is Aliens? Is Aliens a horror movie? Is Aliens an action movie? Is Aliens a sci-fi movie? Do you need to put it in a category? It's kind of defies categorization. Many great horror movies do defy categorization, and so the validation from the Academy in Hollywood, that actually came surprisingly earlier when American Werewolf, won the first ever makeup effects Oscar created specially for. That category was created because everyone was blown away by Rick Baker's work in American Werewolf. So the Academy every now and then does nod their head towards horror, but they are less kind when it comes to that's where this word elevated horror comes from. And you have a movie like Hereditary. That to me is what people are sort of applying elevated horror to, whether you agree with that term or not. That still got complete, Toni Collette got shafted with zero recognition for her performance in Hereditary, which to me was one of the best, if not the best performances of the year. So when it comes
scene
down
at the
to
dining table and she's just kind of monologuing, it's just
it's
etched in my mind.
That is powerful.
So horror fans know everyone's playing catch up. Listen, as the years go by, perception of things always changes and evolves and sometimes just stays the same. And it depends on your foundation and how you look at things. Maybe that's sort of a diplomatic sidestep, but it's like, I have tremendous, it's the Academy Awards. It's the cream of the crop. It's the final word, but are they really the ones that we need validation from? Not really. Hey, listen, the box office and the word of mouth and the merchandising and the appreciation and the love of all these movies that endures, that's all the validation we need, and we don't need a trophy for it. Plus, we have our own award shows anyway. So there's the Rondos, there's the Igors, there's the Saturn Awards. I mean, those don't recognize, Driving Miss Daisy, so they get left out too,
No, totally. And like, you kind of like touched on this already with Hereditary, but like, this kind of like leans into my next question. So, we're often, Colin and I actually talk a lot about how we're living in this kind of like new age or era of horror. Like much like how the 80s brought in a new age of horror following like, the old school Universal monster movies or like The Thing from Another World and things like that. We're starting to see like a lot more horror films right now from studios like Blumhouse and A24, who did Hereditary and Midsommar and things like that. A24 in particular really interests me because I guess Blumhouse is pretty broad and covers a lot of things. Like they own the new Halloween franchise now. So more A24. And like these horror movies kind of like seem to be in a whole different category, right? Like I kind of like to call them like prestige horror, like, where they're really trying to, it feels like any of them can be nominated for Best Picture. Like, like the Lighthouse, for example, or The Witch, right? I just named two Eggers films, but, whatever. But yeah, so Jordan Peele specifically has made horror movies like with like brilliant political messages as well, which is very appealing to the Academy.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you touched on this like briefly at the end of In Search of Darkness, but what are your thoughts on like how the genres kind of evolved? Like we're not slowly, we've kind of somewhat moved away from slashers and, what was really, really prevalent in the 80s. Like they're still here. Don't get me wrong. Like, we get the odd slasher. We're getting, Michael Myers coming back in a big bad way. But, we're getting these like really, I guess, quote, Oscar horror movies. Like, what are your thoughts on the way it's evolved?
I think plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. The more things change, the more they stay the same. You've got Rosemary's Baby, you've got Jaws, you've got The Exorcist, you've got
The Shining.
The Shining, which got no love back then.
Yeah.
Listen, I think if movies now are tapping into the zeitgeist of conversation because of the socio-political ramifications that it encapsulates, where it could have a larger conversation, I think it's great. And I think that all these movies were always there, and there's the pros and the cons to each, and that back then there were some really strong messages. I mean, Godzilla is about the atomic bomb. That's not about a rampaging monster, or is it? It's like however you want to see it. But it's a giant stomping allegory for the atomic age. But did that win a bunch of Oscars? I don't recall. I don't think so. I think now more than ever, people are sort of a little more in tune to how a movie can play into the mainstream. And is it still a horror movie? Does it lose its categorization? What are we really talking about here? I think we're talking about categorization and perception. I think Get Out and Hereditary and Midsommar will always have the stigma of being one foot firmly in the horror genre. And I think the horror genre can almost never escape that because people look down on the horror genre unless you're a fan. We're fans. We don't necessarily see that, but we know that people don't have a proclivity for it, and they thumb their nose at it. And I think storytelling has evolved in a great way, where we live in a golden age right now of television and cable and streaming, where you can have Lovecraft on HBO, you can have Stranger Things, anything in between. People, the people who have the deep pockets are spending money on this because people are consuming it happily, and it gives filmmakers like Ridley Scott an opportunity to go beyond the 2 hour, the rigid 2 hour formula, and tell a story that needs time to breathe and evolve. And maybe you get more seasons after that. So listen, we all win at the end. I mean, going out of genre. I always remember when Fargo, the TV series, came out. I was just like,
my favorite show of all time, dude.
I'm a huge fan of each and every Coen Brothers film. They can do no wrong as far as I'm concerned, and Fargo is untouchable. And when I heard they were doing a TV series and they weren't really involved, I was like, I dismissed it. And then when I heard that they were involved as executive producers, I paid a little more attention, especially after it got rave reviews. But I still thought to myself, why do I need to see Fargo again? I've seen Fargo the way I want to see Fargo. It's almost like a remake. It's like, okay, so it's a series instead of a movie. It's still Fargo, and I'm happy with what I had. And without getting too tangential, when Fargo season 2 came in, and I heard that you didn't need to see Fargo season 1 because they're two independent things with a tiny little bit of crossover, I watched Fargo season 2 with more interest, and I was blown away. And then I went back to season 1, and I was blown away. And then I couldn't wait for season 3, and I was blown away. And I'm very excited. I haven't started watching yet, but the fact that Fargo is back, it's absolutely groundbreaking television, incredible writing, and you couldn't do this in a Fargo movie sequels or anthologies. You just couldn't get it done in the time allotted. So you've asked a question that I've completely gone off the rails with an answer for.
No, honestly, talk more about Fargo because it's one of my favorite shows of all time. I think Noah Hawley is an absolute genius. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Noah Hawley was going to be doing one of the Star Trek sequels too, and I was very excited about that, but I think he dropped it.
I remember something about that. Yeah, I definitely. And then he made Lucy in the Sky, I think, instead, right? Like the one with Natalie Portman. But yeah, we're still hanging out for a Tarantino Star Trek film, but I don't know if that's going to happen.
We'll see.
We'll see.
I just want something because I'm one of the fans of Star Trek Beyond. Of the 3 new movies,
I love that movie.
Beyond to me is the best one, in my opinion. You needed that J.J. Abrams foundation that he created, but story-wise, cast-wise, production-wise, I just thought that was a really fun story that really sort of captured the spirit of the original series and the best of it. That's totally. My Wrath of Khan of the news of the Kelvin timeline.
That's a huge praise. That is awesome. Oh God! Speaking of this, I can't wait for In Search of Tomorrow. Like just I feel your science fiction knowledge like seeping into our little horror kind of like interview, and I'm just like, yes, I can't wait for In Search of Tomorrow. Colin and I have both pledged we can't wait.
Thank you.
I think we got the Colin. Correct me if I'm wrong. You got the Flash Gordon pack as well, right? That was the.
I think so. I think so.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, thank you for supporting that. I mean, it means a lot to me. It really does, because I want to be able to satisfy you guys, and I want to satisfy the fan in me. And so, it's obviously a work in progress right now, and I'm focusing on In Search of Darkness too. But I'm gonna tell you now again. There's so much material, and it's only going to scratch the surface. But we're going to go with a similar format to tackle as much as we can with as much fun as we can, and have all these guys talking about what they love and their influences. And I've had a bunch of interviews already for In Search of Tomorrow, and so I'm excited to do more and start piecing it together.
Gotcha. That's awesome, man. I'm super excited for because I feel like it's, not only do you have In Search of Darkness 2 coming out, I'm still like, oh my God, there's In Search of Tomorrow. And I think there's also, and I know this is, and I don't know if this is something you directed, directly, but the In Search of the Last Action Hero as well, about like 80s action heroes and stuff.
Yeah, that was Oliver Harper's movie. He directed it. I'm a producer on it as a credit, but I would not say that that's Robin Block and Oliver Harper's. I shot a couple interviews too, but it's their movie, and but it all fits in this overall In Search of story, and So
yeah, dude, I love his YouTube channel, the retrospective. Amazing YouTube channel. I think it's so informative and comes from such a great fan perspective. And I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I have one. If I could, there's only one person that I was like, dude, I will buy 1,500 copies of In Search of Tomorrow or Darkness if I can get this person. Lance Henriksen.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Now, can you tell me if he's on In Search of Tomorrow or Search of Darkness Part 2?
I can tell you that we want him, and I can tell you that we're talking to him, and that's all I can. I cannot and I will not make promises. But
sure, yeah,
it's not like who Lance who
right? So. Yeah, in a perfect world, you get everybody, and you have a 12-hour long. I don't care if this thing were 8 hours long, I would still sit down and watch the hell out of it. Lance Henriksen is just he's just such an idol to me in terms of his, and not only is it sci-fi horror, near dark and, obviously aliens and stuff, but even his non-horror sci-fi stuff is still incredible. He's such a great, his book, Not Bad for a Human, is an incredible autobiography about being illiterate till he was like 20. And I was like, what the hell, man? Right. What an interesting dude. And I was like, man, I'm just crossing fingers. Like, let me know what I got to do. Okay. If he lives nearby, I swear to God, I'll be like, like, come on, dude, come help me out.
Well, that's why I came on the podcast. I was hoping you could knock on his door and just get on your knees and plead.
We've got so much pull.
My girlfriend's brother, somehow, I think like his girlfriend, somehow they knew Lance Henriksen. And, I think he lives out in like Arizona or New Mexico or something. But they were like, oh, yeah, I got to go drop on my buddy Lance's house and just do something. Had no idea, pulled up and was like, holy shit, is that Bishop from Aliens? And they're like, well, yeah, Lance Henriksen. He was like, I had no idea, but like, even his comedic stuff, like, Club Dread's like Slam and Salmon, and it's like when he's doing comedic stuff, it's so, Dog Day Afternoon, the dude has been in so much when you really look back. And I was like, God, fingers crossed, man. I was like, I will do anything to get Lance Henriksen on that because I absolutely love that dude.
I rewatched one of my all-time favorite movies, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, semi-recently, and I was like, oh yeah, he's in this too.
Yeah, he kind of pops up in a lot of stuff. The last place you expect. Obviously Pumpkinhead. He's amazing in Pumpkinhead. I love God damn you, and he already has. I'm like, oh, I love that moment, dude. It's so good. And in mentioning not only Zoheb and I, obviously backers, obviously fans, but there's another person who not only has a podcast, but is a big part of our, I guess, kind of, he's a backer of
community.
of our community. He's a patron. He's a patron for us on Patreon. His name's Patrick Harrington. He actually has a podcast called Married People Watch Movies. He covers movies with his wife Barb, and he has been like the town crier of this as well. Like, posting
wonderful
all the time. He's such a big supporter of it, and he's the only person that I was like, hey, you're the only person I'm telling right now before we put the episode out, but we're interviewing. He was like, oh my God.
It's kind of like one of those things where, with your Lance Henriksen, with us, it's with you. We don't tell anyone about our guest spots beforehand because, man, it's kind of like one of those if it happens things. Like,
yeah, well, you're smart. I'm the same way. I don't if I land talent, but I haven't interviewed them yet. I don't want to jinx myself. And it's not It's not until the interview happened and then I check the tape to make sure I got it on tape. Then I could say, yeah.
Learn that the hard way.
Exactly. Yes, we had one where it just taught us a lesson, and we're like, God damn it, we can't blow our load, so to speak.
Yeah,
really.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I definitely don't like to jinx myself. I'm not a superstitious person, but I am in that way for some random reason. So maybe I am a superstitious person.
Yeah, well, you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot, and be like, well, that didn't happen.
That's the thing. Maybe it isn't superstitious. I categorize it as superstitious, but it's just common sense. Like if you go around crowing that you've got something and then you don't, who's got egg on your face? So.
Right. It's like spending money before you get it. You're like, you really didn't have that yet, though. So Patrick,
I'm the Clark Griswold of interviews.
Patrick, he really only had two questions, and one of them we kind of already touched. He's like, are the ones that were left out of the first one the reason why they're doing a follow-up? And I was like, well, yeah, because we kind of touched on that. There's new interviews. There's some stuff still left over from In Search of Darkness Part 1. So I guess kind of like, yes, there's obviously a sequel because there's a demand, first and foremost. But to kind of get a little bit more specific, just for even my own questions of how much, how many interviews, like in a time, was it an hour or 2 hours? Like what was left over from the first one that you were like, we have so much footage, we can't just leave this here, and obviously, like I said, it's not making it just to make it. It was a huge success. This has absolutely been phenomenal, and the response has been amazing. Was it, like you said, there was, I can't remember exactly how many interviews you said were left over from the first one, but, was there a certain, like, do we have, basically, because I know that there's a cutoff too with Blu-ray DVDs, you can only put so much stuff onto that format. So, because I know you guys, probably an hour or two with each person, and there's 50 of them. It's like, dude, that is a lot of stuff.
Exactly. Do the math. So, it's like if I sit down with everyone for minimum an hour, most hour and a half to 2 hours, some people more, and you multiply that by 47 people from the first movie without doing any new interviews whatsoever. There's a mountain of great material that's just unused. It's not like the odds and ends on the floor that we, scrape together.
Right.
I mean, I was able to, and that was part of my process was when I was sitting there for 3 months, not allowed to go out to do interviews, I was making this movie with the material from the first film. And I had more than enough to the point where I laugh again because, I put my editor, Sam, through the ringer is, there's a balance of putting material together in the hopes that you're going to get more. But then when you get more, you got to scale back on the material you've got. And then you have to start killing babies because you have all these great pieces. But then you have all this great new material that you either can integrate or you just have to get rid of one to put in the new thing. So I had a 90-minute movie before I shot a brand new interview, and that's
nice.
And that's just I could have gone more, but that's just in terms of the concentration of what I wanted to do in terms of in between chapters, that's and a couple movie segments. So then I started doing the interview and interviews. And it's a wealth of material. And so what I've built up already was now it's a question of integrating and putting in all the new stuff. But, I'm sort of getting broad. Ultimately, got same structure, 80 to 89. You got segments of movies that we focus on in between, all brand new movies. So you have brand new movies for 10 years of movies. Then you have chapters in between, like we did, and they're all new, brand new chapters, entirely new. So it's all new material. It's all new interviews. And, one thing that I did, which I thought was really kind of important was, so now I am landing, Robert Englund, now I get Nancy Allen. And so if you think about it, with Nancy Allen, for example, we did Dress to Kill in the last movie. With Robert Englund, we did, Nightmare on Elm Street, ad nauseum in the first movie. So how do I bring these people in and integrate that material so it's fresh and new, and you don't just do the movie again with a different person's point of view? I chose not to do that because I felt it would be redundant. So I decided to make chapters that are focusing only on these individuals, where they're talking about their career. So I have Tom Savini on Tom Savini, Robert Englund on Robert Englund, Nancy Allen on Nancy Allen, and we do that with Linnea Quigley as well, Linnea Quigley on Linnea Quigley. And they're talking about their careers, and they're talking about how their films all fit in this big puzzle of 80s horror. And if there's repetition where Tom Savini talks about Creepshow or Day of the Dead, or Nancy Allen talks about Dress to Kill, it's all new perspective. It's brand new footage that you haven't seen from the first one, so it looks new in terms of that. And it's a brand new take on it, and it's how it fits in their overall career path. So you mentioned 976 Evil. We did a thing on 976 Evil before, but I didn't have the director talking about what it was like to make that. So this time around, I get Robert Englund talking about, we also didn't talk at all about Nightmare on Elm Street 2. So we have a whole Nightmare on Elm Street 2 segment with Robert Englund and Robert Rustler, the co-star, talking about it. And, I have Robert Englund talking about 976 Evil. I have him talking about his 1989 Phantom of the Opera. All sorts of fun stuff. He talks about his TV career. It's an embarrassment of riches with all this brand new material. And it was almost a balance of, we have all this great new material, but I really there's so much amazing stuff from the last film. So that was the challenge of making it all integrated and having everyone still be involved in this essentially continuation of the story with a broader canvas and a world canvas.
It's funny you mentioned Robert Rustler, obviously from Nightmare on Elm Street 2, but he has always been Richard Lawson from Sometimes They Come Back. That's always what that guy has been to me. And everyone's like, oh, he's in Freddy, Freddy Part 2. And I'm like, no. That guy is Richard Lawson. And he's a scary, scary motherfucker in that movie, dude. He's so good.
And don't forget Vamp and Weird Science.
Dude, okay, don't hurt me. I've never seen Weird Science. And I know people are, what? Like, you've never seen that? And there's a lot of stuff where, like, growing up, like, yeah, I saw 976 Evil, and I saw, like, Sometimes They Come Back made for TV, but I didn't watch, like, It or Willy Wonka, or I'm sorry, E.T. or Willy Wonka, or, like, a lot of classic stuff, because it was, like, being the youngest of four kids and being born in 1990, you get all the hand-me-down. So in 96, you're watching movies from 86, and like that was a big thing of seeing these people and being like, oh yeah, he's the guy who played this one part in this. They're like, dude, he's in something like way bigger than that. I'm like, yeah, but that's just what I know him from. It's like that's what I know.
People shouldn't disparage anybody for not having seen something. They should just say, well, you should see it for these reasons, and I hope you like it. Tell me what you think when you see it. It's, there's so many movies and there's only so much time in our lives, so you just add, it gets higher on the queue or not. If people say you got to see it, you got to see it. But that's all right if you haven't seen Weird Science. I don't know. Maybe it won't meet your expectations. Maybe it'll feel really dated. But it is John Hughes, and it is sort of pinnacle 80s, so you might enjoy it.
We recently had this. Like Colin and I don't have that much kind of like overlap, right? Colin has a specific genre that he loves, and I tend to go for more modern movies, but just recently we were talking about Seven, right? David Fincher's Seven. Colin's never seen Seven, and I was like, all right, here's the beauty of the podcast. I'm going to make you watch Seven, and we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, that's what's great about doing our picks, and I can't wait for Monster Squad to roll around, because he's like, I have no idea, and like, I really, really can't wait for that. And there's, so that was kind of getting back to Patrick's question. That was kind of his first one, is the follow up. His second one, and I can't believe he's going to make me ask this. What does Alex Winter smell like? I imagine fresh cut grass.
He smells like a phone booth. He smells like he's been in a phone booth for time immemorial.
He smells like Keanu Reeves.
Yeah.
Is that really his question? What does Alex Winter smell like? I'm going to tell Alex Winter he said that.
Dude, I'm sure Patrick would have. He was like, "Oh my god, I can't." He loves Alex Winter, so seeing him pop up and stuff, and I have
tremendous admiration for Alex Winter because, like everyone else, I knew Alex Winter from Lost Boys and Bill and Ted and Freaked, but that's about it. And I never knew the human being, the person. And I knew that he was a documentary filmmaker, and I was very impressed with that. And his movies are very smart and very in depth, and they cover a real broad spectrum of territory with the type of stuff he does. And I got to interview him on the 30th anniversary of Bill and Ted for The Hollywood Reporter, and that's the first time I sat down with him. And that was when I said, I know it might be a little uncouth, but I'm going to take off my journalist head and I'm going to put on the documentary filmmaker head, and I'd love to have you in Search of Darkness. And he's like, absolutely, sure, no problem. And he is a smart guy, and he is an extremely articulate guy, and he's an extremely amiable fellow. And it's that much more impressive because he's nothing like his Bill persona, who's, a dope, a happy dope. So it's real refreshing. Obviously you're like, well, it's called acting, but Bill Preston Esquire is such a fixture that it's hard to remember that there's just an actor behind that persona, and you expect him to be like Bill, and when he's not, it's very doubly impressive. And he smells like jasmine and vanilla and a phone booth.
He does look like he smells quite good.
Patrick wrote, I imagine he smells like fresh cut grass.
Yeah.
Which is the best smell.
Is that a compliment? That either says he's been picnicking outside or rolling around on the lawn.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means.
Oh, I love mowing. That's like one of the few things I actually love mowing the lawn for. It's like, oh, it smells so
Where
good.
are we right now?
Right, yeah, where are we right now? So when you mow your lawn...
I told Alex I would prefer that he smelled like fall foliage, but I'll take the fresh cut grass.
So yeah, those were kind of Patrick's questions. One of the things that I kind of wanted to bring up was with the revival, in horror, with there being not only new stuff, but also remakes and reboots and stuff. Is there a movie it's kind of a two-part question. Is there one that you're like, for the love of God, don't ever do that, or this definitely needs to be redone again? Or is there something that's sacrosanct that you're like, no, don't do that, or something that you really want to see done?
I've gone through an evolution in my thinking about remakes. And I'm trying to encapsulate it in a short sentence, but I think that I don't have. Go ahead.
I was going to say, while you think of that, I'm happy to throw out one that I personally like, and like this is a remake that I think not a lot of people love, but I loved it because I saw it when I was a kid, and it really introduced me to the franchise. The 2003 Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Mm-hmm. I think I have a weird love for that movie. I don't know why. It's very it's very Michael Bayified because I guess he produced
Jessica. Anyway, keep going.
Sorry, what was that?
I said
that.
One word, Jessica. That's the reason to see it.
Yeah, yes, Jessica. I guess, but yeah, like that kind of like made me see and revisiting it recently. That kind of like really kind of like made me see that franchise done in a different way, like a different kind of like perspective, which is, I guess, what a good remake does.
Before I even name, like Star Wars. I don't remake Star Wars, but it's like down the road it'll happen. It's going to happen. Here's the thing: there will always be remakes. There always have been remakes. There have been remakes way before we were born. We've seen remakes that we didn't even know were remakes, and then we learned they were remakes later. There are remakes that are terrible, and there are remakes that are incredibly well done. And so a lot of it has to do with how emotionally connected are you to the original, and whether you feel like a remake is necessary or not, and you're willing to spend the money to watch it. The 80s is just like you've got The Thing, The Fly, The Blob are all remakes, and they're all great remakes of those films. Arguably, though, one of the reasons why The Thing did so poorly was, people like, Howard Hawks produced The Thing from Another World in the 50s. And, if you think about it, it was like 25 years later that John Carpenter comes along and makes The Thing, which is what Roger Ebert called the barf bag movie of the summer, because it was gross and it was over the top and it was lacking subtlety. All these reasons why they hated it. And I understand why they look at the one that they loved and then they see Carpenter and they're just like, this is absolute crap for a handful of reasons. Now, of course, we all know from our generation that it's become an iconic film. It's one of my all-time favorites, and a standalone film. It's amazing. It's such a well-crafted, it's a pot boiler. Anyway, my point is, Child's Play. I refuse to see the Child's Play remake. I refuse to see the Poltergeist remake. But there's some remakes that come along where I'm like, all right, I don't, I saw the Nightmare on Elm Street remake because I was curious. And because I like Jackie Earle Haley, and that was the reason to go. But I thought it was terrible. But that doesn't mean that the people who are seeing that for the first time can't love it and appreciate it, and then be upset when it gets remade again.
Right.
They get remade. We always complain that Hollywood has no imagination. There's so much brand new material. A lot of it going on TV and cable and streaming right now, but there's so many wonderful brand new ideas and movies as well. And those need to be celebrated. Those need to be supported. And the justification for a remake is to make some money, to make the ones that are not brand new and not remakes. And so it's sort of a necessary part of the business. You can choose to support it with your money, or you could choose to not see it. And you could harp on it all day long. How dare you make a remake? But don't forget that some of your favorite movies are remakes too. And you've got to include that in your harping on the bad stuff, because it's not that black or white. There you go. That's my encapsulation.
That's a great answer.
And I still haven't given you, I gave you Star Wars. Don't remake Star Wars. But even like Back to the Future, like I think to myself, I watch Spider-Man Homecoming and I look at Tom Holland and I think to myself, or I look at Chris Pratt in Jurassic World, and I think to myself, it is inevitable that they will remake Indiana Jones. It's inevitable that they're going to remake Back to the Future. If they did, and if I chose to see it, these are the actors I'd want to see as Marty McFly. And, like you watch any of the Tom Holland stuff, if you just close your eyes as he's delivering his lines, he's doing Marty McFly through and through. Whether that's intentional or coincidental, he's the guy for it. Do I want to see it? No. Will I go see it? Probably not. If it's on TV, will I check it out of curiosity? Sure, I will. There you go. I
don't think Bob Gale's going to let that happen. I don't think Bob Gale's going to let that happen, to be honest.
It doesn't. Listen, it doesn't matter, because 15 years from now, 20 years from now, Bob Zemeckis around or not, it's going to happen. And it will happen. And you either embrace it or you say, here's the last thing I'll say about remakes also. When you remake a movie, it does not take away any of the thunder or impact of the original. Whether you're replacing an actor or whether you're remaking a film, whether you're doing Psycho shot for shot, which Joe Dante has the best line of In Search of Darkness Part 1. It doesn't matter. It's either in your mind, it's something that you want to see, or it's a pointless exercise. But it always succeeds in drawing attention to the original, and I think that's a good thing. So we've got that.
Dude, yeah, that's a fantastic answer because, like, there's somewhere, like, I'm a huge fan of Joel Schumacher's Flatliners. Adore the first movie, and when didn't really like the remake. I didn't hate it, just didn't absolutely love it. And I thought it was kind of sloppy towards the end. But there's also this whole "you ruined my childhood" thing that I'm like, dude, just get over it. Like, Fright Night. That's probably one of my favorite films ever made is Tom Holland's Fright Night. But just because, Colin Farrell is, Chris Sarandon's character now, I watched it once, I forgot about it, and it never occurred to me again. It didn't ruin watching the first one for me. If anything, like you said, it's like a fire that spreads, and they kind of go, well, wait, no, you go to this, and then you kind of start, it's this regress that you actually end up following towards the original one. Even like stuff like Scarface, people have no idea that these things are remakes. So there's really nothing, except for maybe, even the thing's already been softly remade, I guess.
Well, I'd love to interject real quick about Fright Night. I love Fright Night. It's one of my all-time favorites. It's like in my top 5 of the 80s. And a lot of it is also my experience seeing that, because I thought it was going to be a schlocky movie. I just sat down to watch a movie on a Friday night, and it turned out to be so well done. When they remade it, I was like, I dismissed it. I'm like, I don't want to see that. But I did see it out of curiosity. And I thought, I applauded their choice to take the Peter Vincent character and turn it into sort of a different type of character, to bring it into a more modern age and, like sort of a Chris Angel type. Whether or not you like that or not, I at least give them points for trying to not do an exact replica remake. But overall, when I think of the two movies, I'll always go back to the original. But I felt like that's a movie where at least I got to the end. And I'm like, all right, that was pretty well done. It didn't need to happen, but at least it was an enjoyable sit. Versus like Total Recall. The Total Recall remake, I remember sitting thinking, well, this is cool. They're bringing like a whole Blade Runner Philip K. Dick aesthetic into this movie. And easily half hour to 40 minutes in, when they started just doing the greatest moments of the original, the Paul Verhoeven original, I remember watching this movie, wanting to just watch the original again. And I just waiting for the movie to end.
Colin Farrell right now? Is this what's happening? Because he's in both those movies.
Yeah, well, Fright Night, he was good, and I wouldn't blame him for the Total Recall, but he's just sort of like, Arnold is memorable, but he's not that memorable in Total Recall. But I blame more the movie than him. Colin Farrell's given a lot of. I think he was a great bullseye in Daredevil. And I think Daredevil wasn't so bad. Everyone says Daredevil's terrible. It's like, oh, is it really? Why is it so bad? Like, is your childhood ruined by that one as well? I think he was the best thing. He was the best thing about that movie, So I don't know. We all have our opinions. You can't please everybody. I think what it boils down to is, did you enjoy it and why? And why is it important to you? And no one can take that away from you.
Right, that's great. That's a fantastic response to that, especially in the modern age of these really kind of like toxic fandoms of stuff like Star Wars, and there are people in the horror community. Anything that's a remake, anything that's a reboot, anything that's an automatic no. And don't get me wrong, it's probably not going to be great. And like I go in with low expectations, so when something like Flatliners comes and it's not as bad as the 13% Rotten on Tomatoes gives it, I was like, that's a little bit better. It's not great, but the first one will always be, and that's the first one that you saw. It's very rare that one of those is going to come back and be better than the first one. It's not, unless it's just something nobody ever saw the first one. That's not really what's gonna happen. It's not going to uproot that. So it's like there's automatically a handicap there for this is going to be 10 points ahead because you hold it dearly to you. So I think that's a fantastic response, especially with the fandom and stuff. This is honestly my really one of my last two questions from doing this and directing it. This nonfiction documentary. has this made you want to direct something that is fiction? Make a horror movie of something you want to write and direct, or work with a team, or do you strictly just want to stick to like nonfiction documentary filming?
I went to film school, and I've always wanted to make movies, and I've always wanted, directed a bunch of shorts when I was in film school, and I've written screenplays, and in fact, you're not allowed to come into Los Angeles unless you show them that you've written a screenplay. You got to present it at the border.
Prerequisite.
Yeah. Or if you're acting, you have to do a cold read. You have to. Need to be some proof that you want to be in the entertainment industry. That's a joke, but absolutely. It's a good question, and I would absolutely do it. It's a time-consuming thing. I'm a family man. I have a family. I have a life that when you do movies, it takes a lot of time away from your world that you built. And I would welcome the opportunity to do a feature film. Absolutely, I've always wanted to do one. I kind of put that aside when I got into entertainment journalism. So this has been a dream come true for me to be able to make movies in the sort of, quote unquote convenience of how I built my own personal life. Because it's not as time consuming as going on location or being on a set, 15, 20 hours a day, sometimes 6 days a week. That's hard on the reality that you've built for yourself, unless you're, single. So I kind of get best of both worlds this way. And it makes me very, very happy. Should that opportunity arise, I would absolutely embrace it. But the way things are right now, I'm quite content.
No, that's awesome. And especially from us doing this podcast, I enjoy doing the podcast, and it is kind of like that. But I've always, I've shot a short film with a friend, before. But it's always like, I as much as I enjoy talking about films and stuff, there is kind of like that. Yeah, I would love to be able to do that. I think anybody who, make something where you talk about, either it's a podcast talking about movies or a documentary talking about movies, I think it's almost like kind of a given. It's rare to find someone who's like, no, I'm fine with doing these documentaries. It's like, no, dude, you put it on Kickstarter, I will be there, dude. You let me know. You send me the link. You know where we are on Twitter. Really, my last question is, obviously midnight double feature. We're all about double features over here. What is your 1-2 combo for double features? Like if you're watching something Halloween night, you're looking to do a double feature. What's your pick?
Lately, I've been doing sort of a horror palette cleanser, because I've the best homework in the world. I get to watch 80s horror movies all day long for my job. And I've been living in that 80s horror world for quite some time. And now that it's, spooky season, people like to retort, spooky season. I do this year round. But the reality is, when it comes to Halloween in October, I really do find myself reverting more and more to the classic Universal monsters and the Hammer horror films. And, I mentioned earlier that I rewatched, The Birds, and I'd be happy to go back to Psycho again. I mean, last night I just watched, Brides of Dracula, Hammer horror, Peter Cushing, who kicks ass in that way.
Did you love The Invisible Man this year with what's it called?
Yeah.
I'm forgetting your name.
Yeah, well, the Lee Wanell with Yes. I will tell you that The Invisible Man, to me, was a extremely well-made film, and I really enjoyed it. But to me, The Invisible Man, and as an update, it was clever. I have nothing bad to say about what was presented to me, but my own personal taste, it was a stalker movie, and I'm not into stalker movies.
Yeah.
And The Invisible Man, to me, invisible by technology versus a magic potion or something like that. Listen, that also makes sense, because a potion is technology too. What's the difference, arguably? It didn't appeal to me. So I enjoyed it. I thought the performances were absolutely great. I thought the effects were spectacular. I didn't see a lot of things coming. There were a lot of suspensions of disbelief that I had to suspend my disbelief, but I went with it because I wanted to enjoy it. But at the end of the day, it's not an actual movie that I enjoy seeing. I like more of an escapist kind of thing. My horror, I don't like being grounded in the reality of people being terrorized.
That makes sense.
I rewatched Whatever Happened to Baby Jane this week, and I found myself being very depressed by it. Because it's about a very depressing situation with horrific elements in it. And I just found it depressing. And I think maybe it's the age of COVID. I need a little more fantasy in my escapism.
Oh, yeah.
And so because it's spooky season, or maybe I've got a spooky-sism. Maybe that's my malady.
Yeah.
I'm going back to the Hammer and the Universal stuff. So my ultimate double feature would be like a Hammer horror, a Universal monster movie with a shot of Hammer afterwards. Nice. I was going to say if you haven't seen Brides of Dracula, you got to see it. Peter Cushing kicks ass in that movie, and I don't want to give any spoilers away, but there's a scene in that movie where you think he's going to die, and the way he gets out of his situation is something that you never see in horror movies today. And it's Peacock, which is the NBC streaming app, the Universal NBC streaming app. It has all those classic Universal and a lot of the Hammer horror movies on there that you can watch for free with limited commercials, and I'm not getting paid to show for them, but it's easy access. And I'm just going movie after movie after movie, and I've been watching House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, Bride of Frankenstein, Curse of the Werewolf, Hammer horror with a young Oliver Reed. I'm just in absolute heaven, and this is making me real happy. What are you guys watching? What's your double feature?
Zoe, go for it.
Oh shit!
All right, back to me. No, I'm just
so for me, it's my mind automatically goes to Fincher. I love David Fincher. We talked about Seven very recently on the podcast, so it's super fresh in my mind. I find that movie strangely rewatchable. No matter how dark it is, it's so dark, but it's just the visuals of it and the music, the performances. That movie, that's one of my favorite movies of all time.
You're talking about Seven? You're talking about Seven?
Seven, yeah. Yeah.
So, and Colin, you now know what's in the box, right? You now know.
Yeah.
What's in the box?
Now the meme makes sense to you.
If I'm following it up with something, I'd want it to be something, I guess, a bit lighter. So I think it'll be T2, Terminator 2, man. That would be the perfect kind of follow-up cleansing, get all this dirt and grime off me from 7 and just cover me in just Terminator. Just do it. Just give it to me. Colin, you know what? We've actually never asked each other this question. So thank you, David, for asking this question.
Sure. Well, I want to jump in real quick and just vouch for Fight Club. That's one of my all-time favorite films. And that's a gut punch, literally and figuratively, of a movie, especially for those who haven't seen it. I won't ruin it, but it's not what you expect. And I remember when Fight Club first came out, I was not interested. I'm a big fan of Chuck Palahniuk's writing. Choke is one of my favorite books. But
yes.
Fight Club, to me, when it first came out, I'm like, do I really want to see a shirtless Brad Pitt punching people in the face? Is that really what I want to pay for? But because it was Fincher, I chose to watch it. And then when I realized that movie is not anything to do with Fight Club, arguably, that ultimately became one of my favorite films.
It's
awesome.
It's fantastic, dude. Amazing.
Well, and yes, and I too am a huge Chuck Palahniuk connoisseur. Choke, Fight Club, Rant, Invisible Monsters is probably my favorite. I think that is an amazing book. And actually, those lyrics are used heavily in Panic at the Disco's first album. And I was like, dude,
I'm having a moment. Sorry to interrupt. What's the one where the poem kills people? What's it called again? The Chuck Palahniuk book.
With the what that kills people?
I'll look it up.
Anyway, keep going. I'll find. He's got another book where you recite something and it kills people. It's really good.
It's not Lullaby, is it?
Lullaby.
Ah, there you go. Yeah, his right. He's such an underrated writer. He's absolutely amazing. Really, if I'm trying to think of like a double feature, I try to go old school, try to go new school. I want to switch it up. You said Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, and I adore that movie. It was one of my first like Universal classic films, and we would watch the Mummy with Boris Karloff, or no, Mummy Returns was I think the one that we watched a lot more, and it was stuff that we would watch on old sci-fi. I think it was like Christopher Lee with like The Haunting Hour or something. It was something that he did on sci-fi, and we would just record them on VHS. So we definitely did that with Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, and definitely did that with The Mummy Returns. But if I'm going old school, like if I'm thinking like Universal or somewhere around there, I've got to go The Thing. Honestly, the Kurt Russell, John Carpenter one, and not that that's obviously as old as the Universal stuff, but if I'm going old school, The Thing is probably my favorite movie flat out of all time. I think it's absolutely incredible. I think it's unbelievably underrated and such a fantastic movie. Not even throw it out of the horror genre, because it becomes more of like, it's almost like Clue. It's like who is who and who did what and who killed him with here and that. It's this great mystery detective thing at some point, with also these horrible cosmic, and you see imprints of that even today with stuff like The Void. The Void's amazing. That was such a good movie, and I really, really enjoyed it. But if I'm
still
going,
can't believe we're speaking with someone who's spoken to Keith David. Sorry to cut you
off.
Oh,
dude, no.
Like that. That is just like.
Dude, I adore Keith David, man. He's so, like, actors like there's this weird kind of thing for me of like Lance Henriksen, Jeff Goldblum, Keith David, a lot of these actors around the time.
My next movie is Keith David reading the phone book.
Do it. You know what? I'll pay for it.
Dude, the only reason I want to see Tales from the Hood 2 is because he's the guy. But then in the third one, it's Tony Todd, and I was like, oh God, that's so good, man. But honestly, it's kind of a toss up. I'm definitely going to go The Thing with my left hook, and then right hook might be Tom Savini's remake of Night of the Living Dead. I honestly.
Fantastic film, and talk about remakes. That's a remake that is preferable to me from the original. The original, the Romero Foundation was absolutely necessary, but he won up that, and Savini turned that into such a great film.
Dude, you took the words right out of my mouth, because that movie came out the year I was born, so that was the one that I saw way before I ever saw the original one. And it's in the original one's nothing to be sniffed at. It's great, but the second one, Tony Todd, it's amazing in that. He is so good. And oh God, I'm
Patricia Tallman.
Thank you, dude. She's so. It takes
and Bill Moseley's in it too.
Yes, yeah, dude. And dude, he's so. And I love Patricia Tallman.
You, Barbara.
I love her in that, because she is such a change from the first one, and I was like, yes, like that is so good. She's just really, and not to I think a lot of people throw around the word progressive. I mean, it's obviously progressive, but at the same time, she's a very active person, and she becomes a total badass.
It's rewarding to see, because back then that movie came out 4 years after Aliens came out. And Ripley was the template for Patricia Tallman's character, to turn her not into a screaming damsel in distress, but a capable, resilient person who can fend for herself. But she has to go through her own evolution to do it, and that's what makes her such a great character. But as a film fan, as a fan of storytelling, it's nice to sidestep the tropes and see a character that you could root for, and that you could. Part of one of the reasons why, and I'm sorry I interrupted, but it's like
no.
Part of the reasons why it's enjoyable to watch horror films, at least for me, is because it's the vicarious enjoyment of putting myself in that situation and what would I do. And when the characters do everything that's completely wrong, it's a frustrating movie experience, and you hope they all die. Then that's when you start rooting for the killer. But when you have a movie where people are in a very dire situation and they're making the moves that you would make, it's a validating experience, saying, yes, do that. Now do this. You're going to do it. Yes, you did that. And then you're vested in the story, and then it becomes really good. I mean, I'm a huge fan of The Mist.
So
this
good.
is like tangential, but I think The Mist is great. But I love these scenarios where there are many characters doing many different things, so you align with the character that you think reflects you the most, and that to me is elevated storytelling, because you're invested in what's going on and you're buying what the writer is writing, what the actors are acting, and what the director is directing, versus the contrary nature of non-intuitive performance and storytelling.
Dude, yeah, absolutely.
I'll take this moment also before I forget. We were talking about the classic Universal movies, and this is an obvious one to me. It's one I return to every Halloween season, and if it's not obvious to your audience, you must stop what you're doing and go see Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. It's the ultimate comedy horror hybrid, and it's more than Frankenstein. You've got Dracula, you've got the Wolfman, and it's just so fun and so entertaining, and it just encapsulates such a great era. My 8-year-old kid, we watch it every October, and he quotes it with me, and that is incredibly satisfactory for me.
Right, and that's so awesome. Yeah. It's so special to see. Like we went to a horror convention, horror sci-fi movie convention last year in November, and there was Kane Hodder was there. We got to meet Chris Sarandon, and I was unbelievably nice guy. I remember leaving and going he's like, "Hey, do you want anything else?" And Chris Sarandon was very much so like, "Can I look at the photos on your phone and make sure that they look okay?" And I was like, make sure that you got your money's worth. And I was like, what a nice guy. And I remember leaving, and I was like, he's like, "You want anything else?" Like, "Can I have a hug?" And he was like, "Yes, I need hugs. Of course, come here." And I was like, what a sweetheart, man. I loved meeting him. He was so unbelievably cool. But when, I'm sorry, I just went on a Chris Sarandon,
hey.
But,
people don't talk enough about Chris Sarandon.
No, and it was great because Carrie, I know people, is it Carrie Elways, Carrie Yules? I know there's a couple of different ways that people say his name.
I've heard Elways.
I have
Elways.
Elways. Okay,
Carrie
gotcha.
Elways.
Yeah, and William Shatner, George Takei, there was a lot of people there.
To this day, I feel guilty that I caused Carrie Elways to get a parking ticket.
Whoa!
I was in
Westwood.
I was in Westwood, right in front of the ATM, and I was about to back into the only space in a really crowded area by UCLA. And right when I'm backing in, this a-hole pulls right into the spot. And I went right next to him, and I gave him a look like, "Oh," and he kind of did this, "Oh, sorry, did I do that? I'm sorry." And he pulled out. And I said, "Thank you." But it was Carrie Elways, and I think he just wasn't thinking about it. And so he parked right behind the car, which was in the red zone, because he needed to go to the ATM as well. And I got in my car, and as I was going out, I saw that he was getting a ticket. And I felt so badly because he was so thoughtful to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, let me get out. I didn't realize I had done that." And then he got a ticket. And so I'm sorry, Carrie, if you're listening to me now.
He's at home listening to this you're the one.
Wesley. I am Wesley.
But sorry. Honestly, my first pick's probably going to be The Thing, but if I go with a second one, it really needs to be something a little bit more of a palate cleanser. So I was thinking maybe The Taking of Deborah Logan, fantastic movie. I love, again, horribly underrated. I love Trick or Treat, fantastic movie, somewhat newer, but I think to Halloween double feature, the juxtaposition, and this is, I promise I'm not trying to be the obscure, you probably never heard of this guy movie, but probably Ray Bradbury.
Never heard of it guy is good, because you need more obscure, I've never heard of it guys talking about movies that you haven't heard, so you can discover them.
Yeah, they're an indie band. You probably haven't heard of them.
Well, it's not about positioning yourself as I'm the guy who has all the things that you don't know because I'm superior. You guys are sort of touching on some fandom things that I'm not saying you are responsible, but we all experience where you put something out there and people get condescending about whether they've seen something or not, or they take you to task for knowing something that they don't. listen, we all don't know it all. And
Right.
if you take this opportunity to say, hey, I learned something, or thanks for the suggestion, or oh, you mentioned that, now I'm going to make an effort to look for it, then we're all the better for it. If we spent less time taking other people to task for, trying to one up us on their intelligence factor, then it's like we'd be that less toxic in the online world.
Yes, and that's absolutely necessary. I'd say my second one, if I have to pick, is going to be the animated version of Ray Bradbury's The Halloween Tree. Came out, and I am almost like moved to tears hearing that music at the beginning, because it's so that my memory only goes so far back, but that was 93. I was probably 5 years old watching that, but I immediately am like, I remember this. And it's such a fantastic story of, not only is it educational, but it also gives like a lot of, right at the beginning, he's like, better than Christmas, better than Easter, better than Thanksgiving, Halloween. And I was like, yes, like that's exactly how I felt. And just, kids in a small town, kids on bikes, anything kids on bikes, I'm always down for.
There's a great version of the Halloween Tree by Ray Bradbury that's illustrated by Gris Grimley. And Gris Grimley is this incredibly talented artist who does this sort of very wonderful Gothic kind of stuff. And he did this wonderful, colorfully illustrated version of the Halloween Tree that came out in 2015. And seek it out. Go to, grisgrimley.com. Grimley, Grimly, I think. Anyway, he does
literally
fantastic
Googling
art.
it, yeah.
He has this wonderful his art first caught my attention when I saw this image of these kids on a hill trick-or-treating, on their way to go trick-or-treating. And there's a line of people on a hill, and it's semi-silhouetted. And I was just like, this guy knows exactly what I'm thinking. And
right.
I ended up interviewing him for my first issue of Famous Monsters when he did that Halloween Tree illustration, and it was a real treat. And so I like to broadcast attention to that whenever I can. So it's a great story.
As soon as you said that, I Googled and add to cart and checked out. I was like, cool, got it. No, I'm buying that now. If I could honestly, if anybody's like, here's the keys to an unlimited budget, any movie you want to remake, and I'd be like, Halloween Tree. And they're already in talks to do it, because it was never, it was an animated film, and I know they'll change it, probably set it in the 80s or something, but even something like Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I wasn't a huge fan of what they did, but it was still pretty faithful. And it's hard with an anthology like that to make that one cohesive story. But anything the VHS movies are fantastic, and any of that stuff with anthology horror, Tales from the Crypt, Tales from the Hood, I'm always going to be down for. I really, really love them. But I'm all out of questions. I have had a blast doing this. This has been so much fun. Before we jump off here, do you want to tell everybody where they can find you, where they can support the film, give them the whole kit and caboodle?
Absolutely. The kit and caboodle. No poppycock here. I think we should go to 80shorrordoc.com. Between now and midnight on Halloween, you can get In Search of Darkness Part 2. It comes in this really cool package where you get your name in the credits, you get posters, you get enamel pins, slipcover, download of the first movie. If you want in your hand the second movie, there's an option to get that as well for only $15 more, which is really good, because a lot of people miss that first time around. And it also gives you access to our online horror Discord community. So there's lots of goodies, and it's really cool. So if you're into it, please spread the word about that. And if you want to interact with me, I'm on a variety of platforms. I have my own site called itcamefromblog.com. So you could find me on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram at itcamefromblog, and I'm also on Twitter at Tiki Ambassador. And I'm on all these platforms, but if you really want a more direct interaction, I would say Twitter is probably the best bet.
Nice. Very cool. Very cool, man. I'm so excited that not only is there a sequel coming out, that there's In Search of Tomorrow, and I'm like, okay, fingers crossed there's a sequel to In Search of Tomorrow. I don't want to count those eggs before they hatch, but I'm like, oh, come on, please. I know.
If people are supporting our projects, then we will continue to do it because we are enjoying doing this. And there's so much material, and it's just an ongoing conversation. It really is. You know, these are love letters to the genres, and by fans who really love this stuff, and have an opportunity to sort of be a conduit of the people who make it and the people who consume it, and we can put it together in a package where everyone can sort of learn something and be entertained and go down memory lane and you know, we care, and if you support us, we can continue to care.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, and it feels so great now with, like, not only is there a lot of nostalgia for the 80s, you know, right now with Stranger Things and It, and, you know, there's a lot of that going on, but at the same time, the horror community has always been there. Like, it's not going anywhere, and it's if anything, it's gaining momentum. And now I think people, you know, when you look at, like, American Werewolf in London winning the sorry, I almost said the Grammy, the Oscar. It was for special effects and hair and makeup. You know,
it should have won the Grammy. I don't understand. They got right.
Dude, yeah, that's my thing of, like, now I think people are starting to, how long was Stephen King considered horror crap? You know, like, how long was that? And now it's
people
like,
forget that. People forget that Stephen King became something to avoid by the latter half of the 80s. He's had an absolute renaissance, and all the remakes now with Pet Sematary is another one. I was like, I'm happy with the first. I checked out the second, and I couldn't finish it. And, you know, listen, kudos to the people who made it, and kudos to the people who liked it. But for me, it just didn't work. But sorry, quick digression. You know, it's just like with Stephen King. It's really interesting. I'm glad that they're making another Stand. I think Mick Garris's Stand TV series was great, but I'm very interested to see this next one. You know, also talking about remakes, another one that came to mind that I do want to see is Dune. You know, I mean, I'm a huge Dune fan. I'm a huge appreciator of David Lynch's Dune. I will die on Dune Hill. The book, right? It's one of my all-time favorite books. I'm
halfway through.
Listen, I'm excited. I'm excited for the new Dune, and I hope it does well, because Dune is a great story, and we've got enough distance from the last one, good or bad, to support this new version. I digress.
And just knowing that it's made by a visionary director, dude. Like Denis Villeneuve is just one of my top 3, top 5 directors of all time. Like, he's just killing it, knocking it out of the park.
Well, yeah, if he did what he did with 2049, and it's like, dude, you took Sacrosanct and made it, I mean, some people argue better than the original. I don't think so. I think it's on par. I think it's its own thing and beautiful and on par with the first one as well.
It could have tanked, and it happily complemented the original, which was a Herculean task, right?
Right. Well, it should be its own thing and complement the first one, and that's exactly what it was. It wasn't just a shot-for-shot remake, but it didn't go off the rails and just totally different thing. It felt just like going on the tracks, and you just kept going.
Denis Villeneuve is our new Muad'Dib.
Yes. The spice must flow.
Yes. That's really not that deep a cut, but if you don't know Dune, then that was gibberish just now.
Yeah, that went like right over my head. I was like, huh? But dude, this has been a lot of fun. We would absolutely love to have you back on whenever In Search of Tomorrow, any future projects at all. We would adore having you on. This has been a great conversation, guys. If you want to find us, you know, on our socials, we're on Facebook at Midnight Double Feature. We're on Twitter at MDF Pod. We're on Instagram at Midnight Double Feature. You can find the website midnightdoublefeature.com. Shoot us an email, midnightdoublefeature@gmail.com. Stop by, check us out in the after party. That's our group attached to Facebook. Everybody's invited. It's a fun little group where we talk about our movies and post our memes. And stop by, and if you like what you've heard, we do have a Patreon. That's patreon.com/midnightdoublefeature. And you can be a part of the Green Room. It's $5 a month. Everybody pays the same thing, and everybody gets the same amount of episodes. So stop by, check it out. David, I really, really appreciate having you on. This has been a blast. Zoheb, David, you got anything you would say before we jump off?
No, I'm good, man. Like, this has been an absolute blast. Like I said, like Colin said, man, like, this is, you know, I do these things where I try and like reach out to to people so we can get them on the podcast, because we genuinely like their stuff. Like, you know, it's not like one of those things where it's like, oh, I got this director, I got this writer. Like, you know, it's just, I finished watching your thing and now I want to talk to you about it. Like, that's genuinely what it is, because it's just like, it comes from like a place of love. So, you know, you agreeing to jump on for this interview was just like, you know, I got like a knot in my stomach. I'm just like, what? He responded. So thank you so much.
Well, it's a pleasure chatting with you guys, and I enjoy being allowed to get tangential, because sometimes, you know, that's where the real fun conversations happen. But it's you know, I obviously want to get the word out, but I also I like chatting with guys who know what I'm talking about. I currently have a wife and a kid who look at me blankly like, "Are you done with your horror movie yet?"
Oh, dude,
it's a pleasure to talk with people who know the material, and I'm not talking about my movie. I'm talking about just the genre. So it was real fun for me.
Absolutely, dude. It's a blast. Thank you so much for coming on, guys. Check out In Search of Darkness Part 2. Go support these guys. We'll be on the lookout for In Search of tomorrow. And if you guys want to listen to any more episodes, you can find us on Spotify, YouTube. If we're not on it, you don't want to listen to it. Guys, it's been a lot of fun. Stop by, rate and review us on iTunes. Let us know how we're doing, and we'll see you on the next episode. Peace out.